Now, well, the way this came up, two summers ago, I am on the board of the Aspen Institute, and they co-sponsored a trip to the Arctic along with National Geographic. I can assure you that there is climate change. We left from Norway, up in the Norwegian archipelago, and had to sail for 2 days on an icebreaker before we hit heavy ice. And so the Arctic is very much of an open area. And I wore my polar bear pin. And on the ship was a man whose wife made these pins. They are on sale. We can get the information. They gave me that pin, but it's a C and 2 little pearls for carbon and oxygen, and so they have in fact developed a whole way of doing that. He is a scientist and she is a jewelry maker, and I think it's a terrific combination. And we have the name, Elaine, you've got it.
The other thing is the museum store is going to be carrying that particular pin any day now.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I have to tell you, I went on this trip with my oldest grandson. I shared a cabin with him, which was difficult. It was like being with a tsunami. But the thing that happened on the trip, I just have to tell you, this was an amazing trip. President Carter was on the trip, Chevy Chase, Ted Turner, a lot of, I called it egos on ice. And it was truly remarkable. And we learned a lot. And the National Geographic people took amazing pictures and had a camera under the ship all day, and then they'd show us the movies that they made. And the part that was so amazing is that the food chain is inexorable. And you actually do see polar bears, and the polar bears eat the seals, and you don't know whose side you want to be on. But the thing that would happen is a lot of people spent a lot of money to have this be a fabulous tour. National Geographic did, and the owners of the ship. And what would happen, because it was in the summer, it was perpetual light. So you'd go to sleep, and at 4:30 in the morning, the voice of God would say, "We have just sighted polar bears off 15 miles up, and if you will get dressed and come out on deck, you will see them." So you get dressed, it's freezing cold, you get up there, and they hand you this huge pair of binoculars, and they say, if you see that there's a big ice thing, and next to the left of that piece of ice, there is a jagged piece of ice, and behind that is a piece of ice that's got some dirt on it, and to the left of that is this piece of ice, and the polar bears are on it. And everybody's watching, and you're going, and you finally say, "I see them," and they say, no, you're looking in the wrong place. So looking for white polar bears in the fog on ice is not the easiest thing in the world.
Thank you for sharing that story. Okay, I believe there was a question here.
Hello, my name is Ryan Olson. I'm a student at the Clinton School. Thank you so much for being here. I am humbled and honored just to be in your presence, as I've followed you since I was a little bit younger. So, and thank you all for
So was I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question for you is, I am so passionate about gender and sexuality issues around the world, and I'm curious to know how women's empowerment issues played a part of the work that you did, and how your own gender impacted the interactions you had with foreign dignitaries.
Well, the interesting part about this was that there really was the question about being the first female Secretary of State. And when my name was out there were a lot of people, articles kind of surfaced and said that in fact a woman could not be Secretary of State, and the excuse was that Arab leaders wouldn't deal with her. So what happened was I had just spent 4 years at the United Nations, and so the Arab ambassadors got together and said that they'd had no problems working with me for 4 years. So that kind of debunked that argument. And President Clinton decided otherwise, I think on, as has been told many times, with some input from his wife. And I know very clearly that I would never have been Secretary of State if it hadn't been for Hillary Clinton. And President Clinton told the story himself. We were actually at some embassy somewhere, and he said that there were other names out there, and that Hillary said, well, why wouldn't you appoint Madeleine? She agrees with your policies and states them fairly clearly, and besides, your mother would be very pleased. So I was very happy that happened. Now, I never had any problems with foreign leaders. I had more problems with the men in our own government. Not because they were all male chauvinist pigs, but because they, in fact, had seen me go through a very long ascent in my career. I had, in fact, been a carpool mother and knew some of their wives. I had been a staffer. I worked for Senator Muskie. I had, in my life, made a lot of coffee and done a lot of Xeroxing. And they thought, well, how did she get to be Secretary of State, especially since they thought maybe they should be. So, but I did not have problems abroad. It did help. I arrived in a very large plane that said United States of America. What did happen was that I created an international support group. I had done, when I was ambassador at the UN, when I arrived at the UN, there were 183 countries in the UN at the time, and I had asked my executive assistant to invite all the women permanent representatives for lunch, and it was one of the first times I didn't have to do the cooking myself, so I hadn't bothered to find out how many people were coming. So I get to my apartment, and there's 6 other women there out of 183. They were Canada, Philippines, Kazakhstan, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, and Liechtenstein, and me. So being an American, I created a caucus, and we called ourselves the G7, and we, in fact, lobbied to have women judges on the War Crimes Tribunal. When I was secretary, I created a group of women foreign ministers. And it did have an impact when the United States has a woman Secretary of State. People actually said to me that their government had said, we need a Madeleine. And so the circle has been enlarging. I believe that that politics and the situation in any country changes when women are politically and economically empowered. I think there's no question that there are a series of, in terms of, I've never liked the term women's issues because that makes them kind of auxiliary. What I did when I was Secretary of State was make those issues central to American foreign policy because they are the everyday issues that people have to deal with, which is health, education, jobs, transmitting values. And so I think it is very important. And one of my great friends and partners in this was First Lady Hillary Clinton. We did a lot of things together. And I think it does change things. Now, I am not one of the women who believes that the world would be entirely different if it were run by women, because anybody who says that has forgotten high school. So, but I do think it is important to really have a way that men and women work together. But since women are more than half the population in every country, there ought to be more women in, across the board in a variety of jobs and positions.